Welcome to another edition of the Florida Round Table, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I am Michael Yaffee, filling in for Reagan Smith, who was out sick this week. He will be back next week. So we are getting ever closer to voting in the midterm elections. And if you are voting in the state of Florida, you know you're not only voting for the midterms, but you're also voting for amendments to the Florida Constitution. Well, today we're going to talk to someone from the group Save My Constitution Coalition who wants to abolish the Constitution Revision Commission, the very commission that came up with a lot of those amendments you'll see on the Florida ballot. A lot of interesting things to say, and we'll get to that coming up next here on the Florida Roundtable.
Want to fly somewhere? Looking for cheap flights or cheap tickets? Then call. That's right. Call the low-cost airline travel hotline now for prices so low we can't publish them anywhere. Low-cost airlines has all kinds of cheap travel deals. Fly domestically and save up to 75%. You can even fly internationally and save even more. Yes, fly anywhere in the world and save a lot of money on your plane tickets. We'll even save you money with cheap travel deals on hotels, rental cars, even complete travel packages. So don't book your tickets until you call us first for the absolute cheapest prices on U.S. and international airline tickets and hotels. Call right now for prices so low they can't be published. Travel experts are here 24/7 to help. 800-754-4531. 800-754-4531. 800-754-4531. That's 800-754-4531.
A pretty common problem in our area is black and green stuff on outdoor surfaces. You scrub it off and it comes right back. You need something that will keep it clean. Wet and Forget. It keeps surfaces clean for a year or more. Just spray it on and leave it. Make cleaning easier. Pick up a bottle of Wet and Forget today at Lowe's, Walmart, Ace, or visit wetandforget.com to find a store near you.
This November, Florida voters have many choices to make, but Amendment 10 is one of the most important. Known as the Protection Amendment, Amendment 10 protects your right to vote for constitutional officers like your sheriff and tax collector, so they are elected by you and not appointed by county bureaucrats. Amendment 10 also protects families by creating the Office of Homeland Security in Florida to safeguard our state against terrorism, as well as protects veterans by preserving Florida's Department of Veterans Affairs. To learn more, visit amendment10.org, paid for by the Florida Sheriff's Association.
Welcome back. This is another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I am Michael Yaffee, filling in for Reagan Smith, who is out sick this week, but he will be back next week. We have a really interesting show for you today. I'm going to be interviewing Jim Kallinger, who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition. Now, the Save My Constitution Coalition is an organization. It's a grassroots organization that was founded specifically to speak out against the CRC. Well, what is the CRC? The CRC is the Constitution Revision Commission. Yes, that commission that meets every 20 years. What they do is they propose amendments to the Florida Constitution every 20 years, and those amendments, proposals, will be on the ballot next month during the midterm elections. And he's going to make the case that the process that the CRC goes through to come up with these amendments is corrupt. And he's actually going to strongly make the case, because he has in the past, that the CRC should be abolished and that all Florida voters should vote no on all of those amendments proposed by the CRC this year. Vote no on all. Even if you like some of what they're saying on some of those amendments, he is suggesting that what you should do is vote no on all of them. And I have to say, personally, this is something that I can agree with, that I can definitely tune into, because I have been against all these amendments on the Florida Constitution every year. Usually, I vote no on all of them. Now, most of them are not proposed by this commission that he's calling to abolish. They're proposed by other means every year. But so many times when I read through these amendments on the Florida Constitution, I think to myself, aren't these things that should be left up to the legislature? We are not a direct democracy, in my opinion. It is not the job of the Florida voters to vote on specific things like what we see in these amendments this year. That's why we are a representative republic, even Florida is, where we vote representatives to take care of these things. I mean, a lot of these amendments in general, they'll get voted for and passed on the ballot, and then it'll show up on the ballot next time to get rid of the previous amendment because the Florida legislature realizes they can't do it. It's just kind of mess that just really doesn't belong on the Florida ballot, in my opinion. But this year, it's especially bad because of what the CRC is doing. I mean, just look at one of the amendments that the CRC is proposing, and that will show up on your ballot this year. This is Amendment 9. It says the waters most immediately adjacent to Florida's coastline are in state control, then become federal jurisdiction farther offshore. This amendment pertains just to state-controlled water, prohibiting oil and gas drilling for exploration or extraction in offshore areas. So basically, Amendment 9, the first part of Amendment 9, has a banning on drilling for oil or natural gas or other things off of Florida's coast. Okay, a lot of you might support that. But there's a second part to this amendment that you probably should know about. The second part of the amendment prohibits the indoor use of e-cigarettes and vaping devices. How are those two related? How can you have in the same amendment a ban on offshore drilling and then a ban on e-cigarettes, smoking them inside? They're obviously not related at all. But this is just one example of what the CRC put on the Florida ballot this year, proposed amendments. It's ridiculous. Obviously, there is something wrong with the process of the CRC and how all of this works if these are the kind of amendments you're going to be voting on. That's just one example. There are other examples of these amendments being bundled up together. And they said the reason they did this, it would make it easier. Seems like it's going to make it even more confusing. And I have a feeling I'm going to be waiting in line for a while I'm voting because, frankly, everyone's going to be confused going through all these amendments. The lines are going to be pretty long in Florida, it seems like. So we're going to be talking with Jim Kallinger from the Save My Constitution Coalition. He is very passionate about this subject as well. He has a lot of interesting things to say on that matter. So we're going to get to that next. You are listening to the Florida Round Table, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. The interview coming up in a moment.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-897-0014. 800-897-0014. 800-897-0014. Call right now. 800-897-0014.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bear Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
Welcome back. This is another edition of the Florida Round Table here on Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I am Michael Yaffee, filling in for Reagan Smith, who was out sick this week, but he should be back next week. I appreciate you all joining us today. And today I am talking with a very special guest who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition. He's a member of that coalition. His name is Jim Kallinger, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the Save My Constitution Coalition, which is against the Constitution Revision Commission, which proposes amendments on the ballot every 20 years. So, Jim, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
So before we get into the details of the amendment and the details of the Constitution Revision Commission, I wanted to give you an opportunity to say a little bit about yourself and also how you got involved personally with the Save My Constitution Coalition.
Sure, Mike. I'm a former legislator from the Central Florida area. I was a member of the Florida House of Representatives, and being a former member, always interested in what's going on politically around the state. And when the CRC engaged early last year, I was kind of watching that process with a lot of interest and saw a lot of things that were very concerning, but kind of figured, well, at the end of the day, they're probably going to go ahead and put forth some proposals that are meaningful. But in that process, I've been engaging and talking with my fellow former legislative friends and asking them, like, hey, have you been watching this process? And they as well had been watching and had the same thoughts that I did. And again, just very disappointed with the performance of the CRC and the way they were, I guess I would say, behaving. And so we just kind of started talking and spreading the word amongst former legislators, and we came to a decision to go ahead and form a coalition and to speak up against the work of the CRC. We kind of feel as former legislators, we still have we feel a duty and obligation to get engaged, and we feel it's only fair if we try to inform Florida's voters of what's going on and encourage them to vote no on these proposed amendments.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the Constitution Revision Commission. As you mentioned, it's a commission that proposes ballots, amendments on the Florida ballot, so it would be for the Florida Constitution. Talk a little bit about what they exactly do, the history behind that, and then why your organization or coalition has a problem with it. Okay.
And just to, keep from twisting our tongues, well, I guess we'll just call it the CRC, the Constitution Revision Commission. So they meet every 20 years. We had a new, I guess quote, new Constitution was enacted back in 1968. And in that new Constitution, they created the CRC, which meets every 20 years to basically review our Constitution and then propose, any changes. But, to be clear on that, the language in the Florida Constitution that directs the CRC, and I'll quote, it says, the CRC is to make its proposal, if any, of a revision to this Constitution. And we think that the current CRC has gone way beyond that call of duty. Very simply, the original intent of the CRC was to review our Constitution for minor corrections, I guess I would say, such as reducing the size and scope of the document, cleaning up any arcane or outdated language, or maybe streamlining the document for efficiency and clarity. In other words, proposals that do not warrant the considerable effort of a joint resolution or a ballot initiative or a constitutional convention. So this group really is just to kind of review the document. Did we not cross a T? Did we not dot an I? and then, make those corrections or, propose those corrections. But they've just gone way beyond that with many far-reaching controversial issues and really trying to clutter our Constitution with issues really that just do not belong in our Constitution, and issues really that are legislative in nature and ought to be dealt with our legislature through the legislative process.
It's really interesting you bring that up. One of my biggest complaints of the Florida amendment process is it seems to me that a lot of the amendments that are proposed, and this goes beyond the CRC just in general, are things that the legislature should be taking care of, and it's not something that should be on an amendment to the Constitution. That the amendments really should be, like you said, reviewing either the size and scope of the Constitution or stuff like that. Do you kind of agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Issues that pertain to the form and function of government or the framework of government. Not a lot of issues that, like I said, are legislative in nature that ought to be dealt with. That process, the legislative process, it's transparent. There's plenty of input, from the public. There's a lot of debate, a lot of deliberation. At the end of the day, they may or may not come forth with a bill that they pass and create a new law. But then inevitably, and I can tell you this from experience, we pass a law and then we put it out to 20 million people and we find out that, we've created some unintended consequences, there's some problems, and we can easily go back the next session or, if we have to, call a special session and amend that statute and correct the problem. When you enshrine these issues in the Constitution and they're problematic, there's really no way to go back and make a correction unless you put another issue back on the ballot to make that correction. So, you create a dangerous situation by putting these issues into the Constitution with no way of really, getting right back at them and making any corrections that you did not intend to make in the first place.
I'm speaking with Jim Kallinger, who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition. And to back up a little bit, talking about the CRC, what exactly makes up the CRC? Who are these members of this board that come up with these amendments?
Well, there's 37 members on the CRC, and basically they're all appointed either by the governor, Speaker of the House, or Senate President. And so it's an appointed body. They are not elected, and as a result, they have no accountability to anybody because they're not elected. There's really no checks or balances in that process. If you go back to the Florida Constitution, and again, I went through some of the language, but there's really no parameters that are put around this body. And as a result, when you get a group of people together that are not elected with no accountability, politics takes over the process, and as a result, you get a flawed product. And we saw that happen this last go around. But yeah, so it's a body of 37 appointed folks from all walks of life, and we saw, as we were, watching this process, we saw this body really basically comprised of politically active people. Lobbyists were members of the coalition or the CRC. They had a political and self-serving agenda. And so we saw these serious and significant conflicts of interest throughout the process. But again, that's the nature of the CRC, and that's why we have a problem, with the body, with the process, and as a result, through that flawed process, we see their proposals as being flawed as well.
Now, as you said earlier, the CRC meets every 20 years, but there are other amendments to the Florida Constitution as well. This only makes up some of the amendments that you're going to see on the ballot this year. How many of the amendments on the ballot this year are as a result of the CRC?
Yes, there are 13 proposed amendments, but actually number 8 was struck down by the court and removed. But there's basically 1 through 13. Of those, the ones that were put on the ballot by the CRC are amendments 6 through 13. So 1 through 5, actually 1, 2, and 5 were put on by the legislature through a joint resolution, and then numbers 3 and 4 were put on the ballot by a ballot initiative. So 6 through 13 were put on by the CRC.
And 1 through 5, I'm guessing that the Save My Constitution Coalition really doesn't have a stance on those. This is just focused specifically on those amendments proposed by the CRC?
That's correct, Mike. We are just focused on 6 through 13.
And what is the Save My Constitution? What's the coalition's take on this? What are they saying Florida voters should do? Should they just not vote for any of these amendments?
Yeah, Mike, as we observe this process, as former legislators, we've been intimately involved in the legislative process. We see politics for what it is. We're quite aware of the methods used for amending our Constitution. As we saw all the machinations going on with the CRC. We saw some serious problems. We saw, and I think most voters are quite aware of the bundling that has gone on. There's a lot of tactics deployed within these amendments that are deceiving and intentionally put there to try to entice voters to vote for something that may be more controversial, but there's other issues that they look at and go, oh, wow, this may be a good idea. So yes, we're saying vote no on all of them. The process was flawed. As a result, the proposed amendments are flawed. They're politically charged and motivated, and the voters are merely, pawns in this political game of the CRC. And as a result, we just don't think that's fair for voters to be, kind of pulled into that. And so we're encouraging all voters to reject all those amendments, 6 through 13. There may be some.
All right. And don't mean to cut you off, but we are just short on time. We're going to get more into it in a sec, so hold that thought. We're talking to Jim Kallinger, who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition. This is Michael Yaffee with the Florida Round Table, and we will be right back.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They are the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-750-4356.
A Place for Mom offers free one-on-one advice from local advisors and a personalized list of senior living communities you can visit. If you have questions about senior care for your mom or dad, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
Call A Place for Mom in the next 10 minutes to get your free ebook on financing senior care as well as free information on senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-750-4356. That's 1-800-750-4356.
Florida's boating environment is always changing. New sunsets, new experiences that you won't find anywhere else on Earth. But one thing that never changes: boating while impaired by drugs or alcohol. It's illegal in the state of Florida. Boating under the influence will land you in jail, or worse, kill someone you love. It's just simply not a risk worth taking. Learn more about Florida's boating laws at myfwc.com. Brought to you by the FWC Division of Law Enforcement.
Your yard's days of being picked on are over, thanks to the science of Bear Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Its penetrating formula is specifically designed to kill hard-to-control brush, like kudzu, poison ivy, poison oak, and wild berries, roots and all. And the concentrate product even kills stumps, so your yard never has to worry about being bullied. Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. BearAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
Terrorist acts and shootings are often described as great tragedies. They are not. We live in a world so concerned with being politically correct that they're afraid to call evil what it is, evil. Man's sin nature is as old as the Garden of Eden. Many love to blame culture, poverty, or lack of education and opportunity as the problem. They may have a good or bad impact, but the big problem is sin. Acknowledging our sin nature will show us our need for a Savior who changes us from within. That Savior's name is Jesus. He came to die for the sins of all who will acknowledge their sin. Faith in Him strikes a mighty blow at evil. So quit calling man's evil acts a tragedy. They are evil and God hates it. Yet thankfully He loves us in spite of our evil and sin. Jesus not only forgives us, but gives us the want to overcome evil with good. This is Brian Wright, speaking right from my heart.
All right, crew, let's get her dug.
Honey, you want to give me a hand? I'm planting that tree, remember?
No matter how large or small your digging project may be, no matter how urban or rural, you must always call 811 before any digging project. 811 is our national one-call number, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 business days before any digging project, so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. This includes natural gas and petroleum pipelines, electric, communication cables, and water and sewer lines. So before you do this or this, make sure you do this. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811. Brought to you by Common Ground Alliance.
Welcome back. This is another edition of the Florida Round Table here on Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I am Michael Yaffee, filling in for Reagan Smith, who is out sick this week. He should be back next week. And this week I'm talking with Jim Kallinger, who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition. The Save My Constitution Coalition is an organization that is specifically against the CRC, which is Florida's Constitution Revision Commission, and they're actually advocating to vote no on all the amendments proposed by the CRC. And Jim Kallinger joins me right now. So, Jim, before the break, I was talking with you and I asked you specifically, what should voters do when they see these amendments on the ballot, specifically by the CRC? And you were pointing out that you actually think they should just vote no on all of those amendments. And the purpose of why are you calling for them to vote no on all of them?
Sure, Mike. Essentially, the CRC is, and I'm just going to say this, an unelected body of lobbyists with no accountability, no checks or balances. And this group is attempting to amend our Constitution with politically charged proposals that, for the most part, don't even belong in our Constitution and really ought to be handled through the legislative process. This group conducted their business under the heavy influence of special interest groups, and as a result, they put forth a multitude of confusing, we say intentionally misleading, and really suspiciously bundled amendments in an attempt to gain our support, our votes, for their hidden agenda. So really, because of this, what we call mischief of the CRC, and again, as former legislators who, feel a sense of duty and obligation to get involved and, try to, if we can, educate the people of Florida of what's going on, fairly warn them about, what the CRC is up to, and encourage them to vote no on all CRC amendments 6 through 13. One cannot really reasonably nor respectfully look at the merit of any CRC proposal simply because of the, and I'll say deceitful way that it was conceived. So really, no matter how good some of these may sound, there's a hidden objective behind them, and we shouldn't be subject to these political games And as a result, we're saying vote no on all of them.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying there is that you're basically telling people, even if you agree with some of the wording in these amendments, the process is so crooked that they should vote no anyway.
Yeah, because we really don't know what we're getting. I mean, we read something and, maybe it sounds good, but, what's the real intention of that? It's hard to, figure that all out. If it went through the legislative process, trust me, through those debates and deliberation, this stuff comes out. But in this process with the CRC, basically they had the dog and pony show where people got to, stand before the group and, make their presentation. But, after that meeting, everybody went behind closed doors and came up with all these proposals that we see are seriously flawed. Mike, if you, and most voters won't do this, you go to get your ballot, you look at the summary, and you go, wow, is this a good idea or just a bad idea? But, if you looked at the real language behind all this stuff, you'd be probably not only interested, but, maybe surprised to find that, there's a 1 or 2 sentence summary, but there could be, 10, 15, 20 pages of legalese behind each one of these.
Yeah, that's very true.
And if you go to the Florida Department of State, on their website, they have the proposed constitutional amendments, and you can see the full text. And it's just not 1 or 2 sentences long. It's many, many pages long. But again, most voters don't take the time to look at all that stuff. And because of that, and, the CRC, they know that, they feel that they can kind of pull a fast one over the voters. And so we should not be caught, in this game. And so we're encouraging a no vote on all their proposed amendments.
Wow, just looking at the amendments, some of the wording in the summaries that are going to be on the ballot are confusing in and of themselves. I can only imagine how confusing it will be to look at the whole 20 pages, like you said, behind the amendment and all the legalese. I mean, I'm already thinking that people are going to be standing in line for a long time because they're going to be waiting for people reading through all these amendments.
Well, Mike, what's really interesting is, one of the CRC members was asked, about the bundling. Why did they bundle all these ideas and really unrelated ideas into each of these amendments? And the answer was, well, to make it easy for voters and to save time. I don't think that makes it easy for voters. I think it makes it extremely hard for voters to look at an amendment. Yeah, with these multiple issues. And so we're kind of saying, well, let's make it real easy. Let's honestly make it real easy. And so what we're saying, our group, is go to all those amendments 6 through 13, vote no on all of them, and that's easy.
You talk about bundling some of the amendments. I'm just looking over some of the amendments right now. Amendment 6, the first part of that says expand the scope of victims' rights under the Florida Constitution. And then the second part of it says raise the mandatory retirement age of Florida judges, including Supreme Court justices, from 70 to 75. And I can imagine the average voter will read that. Anyone will read that and will say, well, what does one have to do with the other? They're totally not related. How can I vote for this?
Yeah, Mike, I'll give you another example. Amendment number 10, which has buried in that particular amendment a very controversial issue that deals with counties. But, they put in there, creating a Department of Veterans Affairs in the Constitution. Well, we already have this department. One of our coalition members is a former executive director and a former veteran. This is totally unnecessary, but they're putting it in there to create a sense of, this sounds good, but they're basically exploiting, our veterans to gain a vote. In that same amendment, they are requiring FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, to have an office of counterterrorism. Since 9/11, we've already had an Office of Domestic Security that works with federal, state, and local officials to prevent and respond to acts of terrorism. We have 7 regional domestic security task forces located around the state to coordinate with first responders. We have all this stuff, yet they put an issue in one of these amendments to kind of sweeten the deal. It's like, they're kind of, taking advantage of our concern over terrorism and, the goodwill that we have for law enforcement, again, to, deceive us, to gain our vote for, again, this more controversial issue that's buried in that same amendment that deals with counties. We see that throughout this process, and that's just not right. That's why we're saying vote no on all these things.
Yeah, it sounds like it goes right back to the crooked process, as you were saying before. I'm talking with Jim Kallinger, who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition, talking about the CRC and the amendments they have proposed and why you should vote no on all of them. And Jim, before we continue with the conversation, if people want to get involved and help out your coalition, what is the best way they can do that?
Well, if somebody wants to help out, we would love to get any kind of help that we could. Help us spread the word. We're running a very grassroots campaign. We have little or no finances to get our message out, but we are former legislators, so we, sometimes we actually are able to either get on a radio station or get an op-ed printed. But if anybody wants to help out, we would love to get any kind of help to spread the word. They could email me directly. My email address is jim.kallinger, Kallinger, at flspr.com. That's flspr.com.
All right. And yeah, you had said earlier that this is pretty much a grassroots thing. You're not funded by any kind of big seedy organization or anything like that, right?
We are not. This is we are trying to be apolitical with this whole process. Mike, we are former Republican legislators. The CRC was created basically by Republican leadership. So it's kind of a food fight in our own kitchen. Again, we're not pointing fingers, but we're trying to stay pure to our effort. This is not politically motivated.
Okay, and hold on. Yeah, hold on right there, because I want to get more into that when you talk about not being politically motivated, and we'll get to that in the next segment. I also want to talk to you about the future, what happens even after this year of these amendments. We are talking with Jim Kallinger, who's with the Save My Constitution Coalition. You are listening to another edition of the Florida Round Table, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I'm Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
From scenic lakes and rivers to picturesque bays, Florida has many beautiful waterways that are perfect for exploring by canoe. But even when paddling on calm water, it's important to be prepared for the journey, regardless of your experience level. Be sure you're physically ready for the effort, and always wear your life jacket. Before you go, know your limits. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
This November, Florida voters have many choices to make, but Amendment 10 is one of the most important. Known as the Protection Amendment, Amendment 10 protects your right to vote for constitutional officers like your sheriff and tax collector, so they are elected by you and not appointed by county bureaucrats. Amendment 10 also protects families by creating the Office of Homeland Security in Florida to safeguard our state against terrorism, as well as protects veterans by preserving Florida's Department of Veterans Affairs. To learn more, visit amendment10.org, paid for by the Florida Sheriff's Association.
Here's a special message for those of you who owe the IRS at least $10,000 or more in back taxes. The IRS has special programs in place that could eliminate or reduce your tax debt by thousands of dollars. Call the Federal Tax Management Helpline that has been set up for you, 800-267-1344. Stop the wage garnishments, levies, and tax liens now. Once you've qualified and enrolled, the IRS will stop all the collection activities against you. These unique programs have been allocated to help the economy and significant significantly reduce or eliminate your tax burden. The IRS is currently accepting reduced settlements and other favorable programs. You may qualify for substantial savings, so get the help you need. If you owe more than $10,000 in taxes, call for free information and to see if you qualify. Take down the number now for the Federal Tax Management Hotline, 800-267-1344. That's 800-267-1344. 800-267-1344.
Welcome back to another edition of the Florida Round Table, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I am your host for today, Michael Yaffee. Reagan Smith is out sick this week, but he should be back next week. I am talking with Jim Kallinger, who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition. And the Save My Constitution Coalition is a group that is specifically against the CRC, which is the Florida Constitution Revision Commission, which has proposed a number of amendments to the Florida Constitution that will show up on the Florida ballot in just next month when we have the midterm elections. And Jim, before the break, you were talking a little bit about why you helped start the Save My Constitution Coalition and how it really had nothing to do with partisan politics. This is a very apolitical thing. It's an organization that's specifically against the process of the CRC.
Yeah, Mike, as we started out, the Save My Constitution Coalition is a group of about 20 former legislators, and we really, truly are dedicated to preserving and protecting our Florida Constitution. We are no longer in office. Again, we're former legislators, but the oath that we all took, which was to support and defend our Constitution, that idea still looms large in our collective conscience. As former legislators, we see politics, we know politics, but again, we're out of office. We see our Constitution, I would say, under attack. I think it's being assaulted with ideas and proposals that are defective, and we are stepping up and saying, this is wrong. This is not politically motivated. We need to be, aware of what's going on. This group that's trying to amend our Constitution with issues that really don't belong in there. The dangers of amending our Constitution with defective issues. This is not political. This is bigger than politics. This is bigger than, political parties. This is really about our Florida Constitution. And if we are not mindful with what we put into it, there are unintended consequences that we just don't want to see. And so that's why we're doing this. Like you said, Mike, very apolitical. We are here for all the right reasons. And we hope that, we have a chance to reach out to people across the state to, see this for what it is.
And as you said earlier, the Save My Constitution Coalition is telling Florida voters, to vote no on all of the amendments that were proposed by the CRC. But really, you're going beyond that. Am I correct? Because that will solve the problem for this year, but you will still have the CRC in place. And am I right that your goal is to completely get rid of the CRC one day?
Yes, Mike. Right now we are confronting, what we call a clear and present danger with these proposed amendments by the CRC. But we also need to be thinking ahead and really looking into the future. For our sake, for our kids' sake, for our grandkids' sake. The performance of this commission was so dismal and so poor that it has caused us to pause and seriously consider, what we need to do down the road to address the situation. If we don't do something, within the next year or two, after that, people are going to completely forget about the CRC until it, is enacted again in 20 years from now, and we go through this whole process again. So what our goal is as a group, the Save My Constitution Coalition, is we want to work with the legislature and consider a joint resolution next session that would look at the CRC and either abolish it completely or, put some parameters around it. What can we do to appropriately rein it in? Going back to the original intent of the CRC, how can we make sure that it stays true to that original intent and doesn't get out of hand like it has this year?
Yeah, I was going to ask, what are some specific ways that you could reform the CRC to keep it around? It seems like your goal is to abolish it, but if that's not possible, what would be a way to reform it so it's not as corrupt?
Well, let me just say this. As our group has, been talking about, what we want to do, we actually consider it a valuable opportunity that the CRC acted in what we think is such a tremendously irresponsible manner. It really, and I said this, earlier, it has revealed to us and drawn attention to a serious crisis that we have with this group. But, the CRC is enshrined in our Constitution, so if we want to make any changes, whether it's abolishing it or putting parameters around it, we're going to have to go back into the Constitution with a proposed amendment. So we would, work with the legislature next session to put together a joint resolution either to abolish or put some parameters around the CRC. That issue would then go on the ballot in 2020, and the people have to vote. Do they want to abolish the CRC, or whatever we put on the ballot would be abolishment or putting parameters around it. People then have an opportunity to vote on that. But there's ways that you could put some language around the CRC that would require a more open and transparent process. Ways that if it's an issue that's legislative in nature, it would be then referred to the legislature. Again, trying to keep our Constitution pure and not get it filled up with a lot of, bad ideas. So there's certain things that we could put in there that would give, more clear direction to the CRC, because right now it just basically has no direction. And like I said earlier, when you get a group of people not elected, no accountability, no checks and balances, at the end of the day, you have a very flawed product like what we're seeing now. But there are ways that we could put, some framework in there that would, keep that body, under a more controlled process. So at the end of the day, we don't see the bad results like we're seeing now.
Well, Jim, this has been a really educational, conversation. I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing more about the Save My Constitution Coalition. If they want to get involved in some way, what is the best way they can reach you to help you out?
Okay, probably my email address, which is Jim.Kallinger, Kallinger, @flspr.com.
All right. It's been really great talking to you, Jim, and we'll see what happens in just a month or so when we have the midterm elections. We'll see how long the lines are after people are constantly trying to read through all of these amendments. But I really appreciate you coming on the show today, and hopefully we'll get you on again in the future.
I would love to be on your show, Mike, and thank you and Reagan so much for having us.
Not a problem at all. You are listening to the Florida Round Table, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I am Michael Yaffee. We were speaking with Jim Kallinger, who is with the Save My Constitution Coalition, and I have a brief closing thought in just a moment.
Today, I'd like to look at what Christ's coming reveals to all of us. It's always fascinating when you see a daughter and a mom that look so much alike, or a son that's the mirror image of his father. So what does this have to do with Christmas? In Colossians 1:15, Paul wrote, Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. In other words, if you want to know what God is like, you'll find it in his Son. Jesus is the spitting image of his Father in every way. This Christmas, Matthew's account of Jesus' birth may give you extra meaning. He quotes the Jewish prophet Isaiah, "Behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which translated means God with us. You want to know what God is like? Look at his boy. You want to know God personally? Trust in his son. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click Devotions to read the daily devotion and send to a friend.
Florida is kayaking country. Kayaks are a great vessel for exploring the state's beautiful waterways, but it's important to be prepared for the journey regardless of your experience level. Get your boater education and learn about you and your craft's abilities. It'll help you have a safer, more enjoyable time on the water. Before you go, know your limits and always wear your life jacket. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
Unexpected expenses can hit anyone, and many Floridians turn to small dollar loans to manage those temporary financial challenges. When using a small dollar loan, be sure to choose a state licensed lender. Remember that borrowers have rights under Florida law, including flexible repayment options if you can't repay on time. Make sure you understand the cost and terms of the loan before you borrow, and only borrow what you can afford to pay back. For more information, go to borrowsmartfl.com. This message is brought to you by the Florida Community Financial Services Association.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Employ Florida offers resources and services to help you find employment.
Hi, Gary here. Employ Florida helped me improve my interview skills, plus write a great resume. I attended networking events with many employers and other industry professionals just like me. With the workshops and training found at employflorida.com, I was able to land a great job in my field.
Job resources, real results, hired. Employflorida.com. That's employflorida.com.
Welcome to another edition of the Florida Round Table, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Network. I am Michael Yaffee, filling in for Reagan Smith, who was out sick this week but should be back next week. I just had a very interesting conversation on the show with Jim Kallinger. Jim Kallinger is with the Save My Constitution Coalition of Florida. Now, the Save My Constitution Coalition, as he had pointed out, is an organization that is against the Constitution Revision Commission of Florida. This is a commission that meets every 20 years and proposes amendments to the Florida Constitution. And it was a really educational conversation I had with him. And I have to say, I agree with him probably about 99% of what he said, because when I looked at the process of the CRC and how they came up with these amendments, there's no doubt that the process seems corrupt. It's just not a very good process with how it works. And I don't understand why we even have to have this exist every 20 years. So I was really appreciate him coming on the show with me. Next week, Reagan Smith should be back. I really appreciate you all joining me, and I'll catch you next time on another edition of the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to the Florida Roundtable, a news and public affairs presentation of the Florida News Network. The views and opinions expressed during this show are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's management, ownership, or sponsors. Please email your comments to reagansmith@fnnonline.net.